Hi, and welcome to a video from Westeros.org. It has been a bit longer than we said that it would be. That seems to be a trend for us. We've been busy with some other projects, including updates to the website. GDPR has been something we've had to think about, so we've done upgrades to the website, the forum, the wiki is going to get an upgrade, and so on. So those sort of things manage to take up a lot of time, and we've been busy with Breeze as well. He's been taking up a lot of time this spring.
He has been, but it's been all good fun. And
yeah.
other things we've said, we've helped a little bit of just reviewing Fire and Blood and giving some notes to George and to the editors. Working on another little thing, not an app update. I guess I can say that much for the World of Ice and Fire app. So we've been busy, and so yes, we had intended to do a video much earlier than this.
Yeah,
several videos.
Maybe doing some videos basically to fill in when we weren't doing videos, since there was no Game of Thrones season. And yeah, somehow we managed to eat up time with other things anyway. But now there's been some news that we really do need to talk about, and we thought that, well, a video will be the easiest way for us to have a little discussion and get across some of our thoughts about the fact that there's going to be another pilot.
Yeah. Three days ago, the big news was that HBO has finally selected a pilot to go forward from the development stage. As you all remember from our previous videos, they had basically five ideas being developed by different writers to see which could be a successor, as George should call them, to Game of Thrones. And they were all going to be prequels, we know this. Max Borenstein, Carly Rae, Jane Goldman, this is the important one, she's the one who actually got her pilot first. Brian Helgeland and Brian Cogman were the five writers. And yeah, Jane Goldman, known for a lot of comic book movies, really, but some other things as well, is the first to go forward. George has actually just today posted his thoughts on it, and he was thrilled that it's happening. He's enjoyed working with all the writers, he said, although I consulted to some degree with him, but he thinks Goldman's quite the talent, and it's going to be interesting. Now, this one,
I think we should say here, since you mentioned George right away,
yes,
when George says that he has worked with them, he's consulted. He describes it somewhat in his blog post, the fact that some of them have come over to talk with him at his home. There's been various phone conferences, emails, so on, with him giving input and being asked for information or whatever. But he is also very careful to stress that while it says that it's a pilot by Jane Goldman and George R. Martin that has been picked up, she is the writer. It's quite clear from the way he puts it that he's not written this script. In fact, he finishes the post by saying that Winter is still my first priority, and if I didn't have that, don't you think I would have been writing some of these scripts that were up for being pilots? So no, he hasn't written, and precisely what his level of involvement will be if something goes forward is very hard to say, given the fact that he is very much focused on the Winds of Winter. I think that he, as much as he would like to be involved in something again and writing scripts, he realizes how much time that does take.
What did EW? EW was the first to report it, I think. I mean, everyone like Deadline and Hollywood Reporter.
It was everywhere.
Yeah. It takes place thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. The series chronicles the world's descent from the golden age of heroes into its darkest hour. And only one thing is for sure. From the horrifying secrets of Westeros' history to the true origin of the White Walkers, the mysteries of the East, to the Starks of legend, it's not the story we think we know. Have some thoughts on that. Now, the main
thoughts on that.
Yeah, the main thing we can say is this George has not written. I mean, he has written bits and pieces about the Age of Heroes. There's little bits of legends and details spread throughout the books, just a sprinkling, but he has no real, single, cohesive narrative about the Age of Heroes. Like, if you look at our The World of Ice and Fire, which contains
what there is.
Really, almost everything that there is.
I mean, that was from us culling information in the books, and then George
adding
fleshing out a little bit.
And like the most that got fleshed out for really is like a bit of the Iron Islands, like what is that ancient history before the Andals came, the Westerlands, Land the Clever. There's some ideas that he was actually an early Andal, or maybe he was actually a first. I mean, there's all sorts of.
The Veil got a fair bit as well, but a lot of that is later.
Primarily with the Andal invasion, which is after this period, because the Andals, I mean, all sorts of things that we are used to in a Game of Thrones show shouldn't exist.
No, if they do this properly, it should.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Bronze Age. The first men brought bronze, the children used stone. It's the Andals who bring iron. Well, the world is very complicated a bit with the Iron Islands maybe having found iron earlier. But regardless, it's a much more primitive. We talk about the ring forts. I mean, ring forts are a thing that you see in, prehistoric Europe and into sort of Iron Age Europe, Bronze Age Europe. It's not a medieval world. Winterfell should be, if it's even used, it's a ring fort. It's not the castle that we're used to. The wall doesn't exist.
No, it's supposed to be. It would be a very different world. Often people talk about how history has been, or how the world has been the same for a long while in Westeros. And yes, they have obviously been medieval for a very long time now. But there is, if you go back as far as the Age of Heroes, you are talking about a progression from there. And doing a TV show that is primarily basically Bronze Age, if that's what... Yeah. I don't think that's, the earliest we've seen is, Viking Age, really. Okay, classical periods, yes. Of course, Greece and Rome, but if you're talking more of a Northern European, you're really looking at Viking Age as the earliest, and that's a good deal later. I can't really think of anyone who's tried to do anything actually Bronze Age.
No.
Any adaptations that you tend to see of Homeric, Iliad and the Odyssey, those tend to move it forward a bit. They don't really tend to make it particularly Bronze Age. You don't tend to recognize it as being, Minoan and Mycenaean in style. It would have to be if somebody went and adapted Shannon's Age of Bronze.
Which they should do.
Which they should do because it's awesome. But so it should be very different. I mean, I could see this having potential, but at the same time, you're also talking vast spans of time.
Certainly, I mean,
and vast spans of place as well, and no dragons to be ferrying people back and forth.
Well, obviously, I think this is one of the things that would be a topic of this of this thing. Like, when did the dragons get tamed? Our book has some stuff about it. Where the Targaryens, there's suggestions that they learned it from someone else. There's that old thing from A Game of Thrones where Bran dreams or sees a vision of dragons stirring and beyond the Shy, which is well beyond where Dany is, so I should say. So
but
there's questions.
Having dragons flying up to the north and what?
But certainly, it's the period before Valyria. The Valyrians as a culture, existed. Now but it's also the era of Azor Ahai, who is a mysterious figure. They can obviously tie it to Melisandre and Stannis, this warrior. They never said Azor Ahai, I think, in the show. I'm not sure if they ever said it in the extras in the DVDs.
No.
The Warrior of Light is what they talk about. But that has to be, to me, that's what the East bit for this description, the mysteries of the East.
Are they going to go and visit the 5 forts? The equivalent of the wall, basically. Are they going to be raised at the same time? Or are we going to see parallel developments there? Interesting is that in his blog post, George mentions that he would have liked to have seen it called The Long Night.
Which kind of gives us a sense
of sort of gives
the
focus. That it seems to be very much about the what happens in that conflict between the children of the forest and sort of the original races like the giants and what have you, and the First Men. How that leads to the creation of the White Walkers and...
At least according to a show.
At least according to the show, although
we have
we feel that it is pretty likely that is And how that then gets out of control leads to the long night. But that's supposed to have lasted a generation. That could make for a bit of a tedious, snowy set.
And I mean, the other thing about the long night is the legends say it lasted a generation. So it is a snowy set, but it's also, I mean, are we going to cover a generation in a single show, or so where? How are we? What? So there's a lot of big question marks, and
of course they include that part. It's not what you think it is.
That's the part that makes me kind of.
Though when everyone says something like that about a plot where you sort of have an inkling about what it was supposed to be like, that suggests that, hey, we want to surprise the heck out of you. And I mean, my initial thought when I heard about this was, oh, this was possibly the worst idea they could have gone with, except for, an actual an actual sequel to the show, because it is so undefined in many ways. So it feels like HBO just wanted as blank a canvas as possible while still being in Westeros. But, we can make up so many things. And certainly adding that little comment there makes it feel like, yeah, we can just turn your expectations on their head, on sort of for the sake of turning them on their head. And that never sits well with me.
It's a difficult one because this is the most, like I said, George hasn't really created a cohesive narrative for this era. He doubtless has some ideas, and there's perhaps things to be revealed about it that has an impact on the story of A Song of Ice and Fire, but his focus has always been on A Song of Ice and Fire, and everything that's going out of it has come out of what he created for A Song of Ice and Fire. And then to a lesser degree, I mean, Duncan Egg has sort of developed its own, but that's a branch of Ice and Fire. So this is there's an open question of how much information she has and how much she's creating, and that leads, I think, we can discuss next segment, which is Jane Goldman herself, what we know about her, what we could expect about her. I know some people saw her name and it's like, that's it, I'm in. I am in. At least I'm definitely interested in seeing how it develops. But I would temper that a little bit. Yeah. Jane Goldman is a fairly successful writer. She's actually quite successful, especially in Hollywood as a woman. I mean, there's a definite imbalance. Everyone knows it, between who gets a job with directing, writing, and so on. And she's one of the women who's really made a lot of success for herself. But you can divide her career kind of into two parts. One is the part where she is a close collaborator with director Matthew Vaughn. A lot of the films she has made, especially the comic book films,
and the very successful films.
And the most successful films, the most praised films, have been with Matthew Vaughn. And it is hard to say what are the elements of any script in the story that are her and which are Vaughn. Now, it's possible if you go to the Blu-rays, they'll talk about these things. I don't know. The fact that they keep working together suggests that it's a very successful collaboration. But it's kind of hard to pick out, like, to say this is definitely her and that's him.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, a writer on a movie is much more dependent on the director.
Yeah.
It's much more, the director has a lot more influence than in TV. So is she used to doing, big things on her own in that sense? And, what sensibilities and what are the successful elements? Is it entirely an equal collaboration, or is it mostly due to her, or is it mostly, we can't say. That makes it problematic to judge what type of writer and that she's going to be for when show running her own TV show.
Exactly. She's been a producer, and the other part of her career is working on her own and she's produced, but she's all of those examples I can find are her adapting novels, and these have been, for various reasons, not as popular or successful as the work that they did with Matthew Vaughn. In particular, There's the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children was a flat. It didn't really. It was not a big success.
Now I don't know anything about the source material here.
No,
or we
but
haven't seen it,
to the
but
degree that
looking at the response, basically.
the response. I mean, it doesn't matter. Now the Limehouse Golem, I believe, is another one she did. That one has had more success. George List's, she's attached to do the Little Mermaid live. Disney's been doing a lot of live adaptations of their old cartoons. Brian Cogman was doing Sword of the Stone. But again, it's adapting something.
And I mean, I've seen a couple of the comic book things. I guess I've seen a couple of the X-Men. Not really a huge fan, but I enjoyed those enough. I do recall that I wasn't super impressed by Stardust.
Yeah.
We had a little discussion of that where I think you didn't even remember whether you actually read the book beforehand.
Well, I know we have it here somewhere.
Yes, I remember. I definitely did
somewhere.
read the book and found certainly in terms of an adaptation, it wasn't as good as the book, but that tends to be the case.
My recollection is it's a
okay.
It's a nice little movie, but it's not anything.
It didn't leave much of an impression, certainly.
Exactly. I remember Robert De Niro more than anything.
That's right, yeah. And this has to leave a bit more of an impression if it's gonna...
Kick-Ass has probably been her, or X-Men First Class. I don't know which one you'd pick as her kind of biggest film or best film. Kick-Ass, I could go on for ages complaining about Martin Lawrence and the cynicism and the ugliness of the worldview that he espouses. So I'm not a fan. I mean, I'm a fan of Matthew Vaughn's work. It's well adapted, but it's not material. But I mean, the world would not have suffered if it was not adapted. So.
But there you have a problem with the source material to start with. So.
X-Men First Class. Now, X-Men First Class is interesting because it's not really, and also it's not exactly an adaptation. It's playing in a very well explored, very familiar setting with very familiar characters with a little twist of how were they when they were younger, which is, again, it's very loosely inspired by the comics. There's no specific storyline, but it's a homage. It's a melange.
So it has some similarities to what she'll be doing in the sense that she'll be playing in
much less explored waters. So they have Sebastian Shaw and Magneto.
She has characters to work with.
They had characters to work with, and here you don't.
Because I mean, really, but beyond Azora High, technically, if you're looking at the Long Night, do we have anyone else named? Because Brandon the Builder is later, so
he comes after. Yeah, he comes after.
So there's no really
the last hero who is probably Azora High, but we don't know.
You don't exactly have a lot of named legendary characters to hang this on and that people have any familiarity with.
They showed the children on the TV show making the Night King or whatever, the first other, and I guess
they're supposed to be the same.
Those don't count as
I
characters.
don't think people have a great attachment to individual children of the forest.
X-Men Days of Future Past. Now that one, the title comes straight from the famous Chris Claremont story. It's loosely inspired by it, but it's obviously Sentinels and all this stuff. It's drawing elements from it, but it's not.
I don't think I managed to finish that one.
It was all right. It was pretty good. Kingsman, Secret Service, another comic adaptation with Matthew Vaughn. Fun. It's fun. It has some really nice bits, and it was good enough to get a sequel. It was a bit of a hit. It's not one of the greatest comic films ever. And the second one is, did she write that one? Yeah, she wrote a screenplay with.
Isn't she even working on the third?
No, she didn't actually. Yes, she did. The Golden Circle. Is there a third one? Maybe.
I thought I saw it.
That one
progress on her.
I haven't seen it. I was interested. The reviews weren't so great. Fables, she's also attached to that one. Willingham's Fables.
If that
happens,
that seems to be.
So it's a lot of adaptation, and it's a lot of stuff where she has a bevy, a rich amount of material to work with. It doesn't mean that she can't do stuff on her own. It's the thing that kind of gives me pause. It's like, okay, she's definitely, and George seemed happy that she's been picked. HBO obviously sees potential. Are they doing it because is HBO picking it because it's just that blank slate. We can say it's Westeros without being. Now, to me, one of the big surprises was when we discussed these things. Like we did 2 videos discussing these potential, and this was not on our radar. We kind of did. We had discussed it lightly, and we had kind of dismissed it. Like so far back, it's like doing Bronze Age Westeros. Who would really want to go that far back?
I mean, I am concerned because a few seasons of Game of Thrones have taught me to be concerned about HBO's sensibilities in some ways. And I am concerned that they really like the idea of the blank slate, or the blanker slate anyway. My initial thought was that this really isn't very interesting either. I did think a little bit more about it and thought that there are ways that I could see something like this working. But I would have wanted to see it as a bit of an anthology show. Working with legends of the past and exploring them sort of one at a time, and then maybe finding some that can be tied together. But that would be something very different from what they have now with Game of Thrones. I don't know that they would take such a gamble, and the fact that, again, that George is talking about calling it the Long Night suggests that there is a particular focus for it. And it kind of feels a little weird that focus is sort of the darkest hour of Westeros, which is sort of what the current TV show has been leading up to. So it's sort of okay, in the first time around we see the others invading version 2.0, and now we're going to go back and see version 1.0. I'm all for cyclical things in fantasy. I greatly enjoyed the little intro bits to the Wheel of Time in every book, that this is the myth fades to legend and so on, and I like that. But I don't know that if you're really doing a TV show and you're doing 2 separate TV shows, that you want to go to the same territory again, just for the fact, again, the way it sounds like, to turn it on its head. Those sort of factors combined together make me nervous.
Yeah, no,
and I kind of want to like this.
No, I stopped watching with the 5th season, so I'm going to give this a fresh chance and be, if it goes forward, if it goes from pilot, because that's not a given. They may decide it doesn't work. They may decide, like, there's 2 stages. They may decide no, we're not bothering. And then there's some things there that need some fixing, do some reshoots, just like they did the pilot Game of Thrones, and then go forward. And even then, it's possible they'll say, it still doesn't quite gel. We're going to explore something else. Yeah. And as George says,
the others aren't off the table.
One of them is off the table. Yeah. Like, there were 5.
And others.
So someone has, Brian Helgeland has fairly recently done an interview discussing it. Now, he could just be not revealing that he's off. And there were some hints that maybe he was off because he was signed up to start making a film. Right. Directing a film. And maybe, but he was just not keeping his mouth shut about it. Or not. And then there's Borenstein, there's Carly Rae, and there's Brian Cogman. Yeah. We don't know anything as of yet. But 3 of them are, according to George, as he understands it from HBO, either they're holding him in reserve or they're seriously giving consideration of maybe we can do a second pilot at the same time and possibly have 2 series. Kind of like Walking Dead.
Very hard to say whether something like that would work. I mean, how long they can hold it in reserve. I mean, whoever is working on them, some of those creators are going to want to move on to other things, perhaps. Technically, I guess they can buy out the IDs from them, perhaps, and use which I'm not sure how
they have to buy them out, because they obviously
are on spec.
They are. They've obviously paid them to develop it. So, but I don't know. It's Hollywood stuff.
It's Hollywood, but HBO might be hedging its bets and telling people, or George understands it as this could go. But a lot of the time, people get their hopes up and think things are still in development when in fact they're just languishing forever, and slowly dying. So it's very hard to say whether, if this doesn't go ahead. I do think they'll want to try and get another TV show on air somehow. So if they're not happy with this one, they'll probably return to one of the others or start
commission some new ones to be done. They said that, I think, in an interview, like, if none of them land, then we're gonna keep trying to find something to go forward with. So yeah, it was surprising news. And I said I was looking at our old Successor videos, and it was nowhere in our consideration. And to me, it's kind of because it feels like, I mean, and we gave some off the wall one, like Bravos, so something about the founding and establishment of Bravos or something.
Yeah.
You know, where you could see Emilio, but they were almost, I guess I would think about some of them were kind of inconsequential. Like, okay, maybe they could do a cool Bravos series, or a young Tywin Lannister series, but in a way there's no consequence. This does have consequence in the sense that it will reveal the truth about this conflict that happens 10,000 years later.
Well, the truth as they decided.
As they decided. But it's the fact that it's Jane Goldman deciding it. And to what degree... I'm not even sure George has thought that much about... Like Linda said, there's like no named characters. I don't think he has much of a sense of, he doesn't have a legendary founder of the Night's Watch and all his friends. He doesn't know any of this stuff. No. So all of this stuff is going to have to be invented whole cloth.
I mean, I immediately had somebody wondering on Twitter, is this going to spoil things for the remaining 2 books? And I find it, I mean, yes, we are probably going to get like the origin of the others.
In the books?
Yes.
Sure, but I mean, but in that case, it's already been spoiled by the show, so it's not like
I don't think that George is going to give so much detail, was planning to give that much more detail about the Long Night and the, Age of Heroes in the 2 forthcoming books, that this will have any consequence for whatever details are needed. Most of them are going to have to be made up. And how much Jane Goldman is going to be consulting with George for that, and how much she's going to make up on her own. I think the vast majority is going to be her own.
Probably. I mean, we'll know more next year. I mean, I would expect by the end of the year we will probably have a director attached. We will probably, and I'm sure there's people going to wonder, is she going to be able to ask Matthew Vaughn to direct? That would be kind of cool to see someone with such a strong style tackling the small screen. I don't think he's done it before. But, we may even start getting casting information of some of the actors who are going to be attached to it. And hopefully 2019, the pilot will film. But, I mean, in theory, they said there's probably not going to be a TV series before 2020, so...
Yeah. And then we can start looking again and see, wait for that first picture of a chair or something.
It's a chair. I mean, the bronze throne, the wood throne. I don't know. There's a little trepidation, but a lot of curiosity.
A lot of curiosity, but I do hope that if this goes ahead, that they really do, at the very least, go with creating a very different milieu.
Yeah.
That this should not feel like
the Westeros that we know.
The Westeros that we know. No. There should be familiar names, I guess. There should be some Starks around.
The idea, obviously, that there are Starks.
Yes.
More or less, even back then.
But it should look very different. And the North is going to look, there's going to be furs and snow and that whole thing, but they need to make it a bit more primitive, and they need to scale back the castles. It should be good for set building anyway.
I mean, the worst that could happen is it ends up being like a TV version of 10,000 BC. If you've seen anything of that terrible film. Hopefully it will be much better than that. But it's just,
maybe more like weird. A TV version of Clan of the Cave Bear, which they were considering for a while, I believe. That seems to have disappeared.
Well, there was a whole series.
There was an Ireland as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's funny.
So
that's
maybe
funny. That's a bit more Neolithic, though.
True, but they could have some caves and some mammoths, cave lions, giants.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot to wrap your head around, because I mean, if they're doing it right, it's really gonna be very, very different. And if they kind of say, well, we have to make it familiar enough for people, then they're not really doing it right. They're kind of cutting corners to try and. Yeah. So it's just so far in the past. And George makes this comment how oh, some Macers say history's only been half that long. It's not 10,000 years,
Yeah.
it's 5,000 now. It doesn't matter.
I mean,
it's a long time.
I could see them having that again and saying, oh, this is only 2,000 years ago or something, or 1,000 years ago, but I don't remember what timescales they actually mentioned on the show.
Beats me.
So they could try and compress it.
Even more, yeah.
And you know, bring out the famous jetpacks, and people should be able to get around Westeros and
There's no King's Road. There's no King's Road to make it easy to travel.
Well, the jetpacks work anyway.
Yeah.
They don't need the King's Road.
Jetpacks are too advanced. They must have like gyrocopter, like Inspector Gadget.
More like steampunk sort of.
Steampunk, maybe it's a surprise technological age, and a long night was like a nuclear winter. And
oh God, don't start speculating in that, because you know, just you know, they're gonna get that idea out of your head somewhere, because you've said things before as a jest, and then all of a sudden it shows up on the show and in frightening reality. So yeah,
I'll keep my mouth shut.
Oh God, I'm just seeing that now. The long night is a nuclear winter.
I'm not the first to come up with it. People have
no, of course
I think
not.
People have suggested it.
Yes,
but
it's a classic. I've read a number of fantasy and science fiction.
Like I would be very miffed if it's anything other than a magical nuclear winter, as you call it. If it's actual, like, oh, in fact, Westeros is super technological. Yes. That will be very lame. I'm sure it's not what's going to happen. So, but anyways, that is the news.
Full of robots, of course.
Yeah, robots
that got away from the
dinosaurs, robots, laser raptors.
That would explain the laser raptors. This is very true.
I
think we're getting off on a tangent.
Yeah, get on a tangent. So we'll I think we can leave it at that. This has covered all the news, and obviously it's going to be months, I think, before we hear much more.
Yeah.
Maybe the first thing we might hear actually is maybe Jane Goldman will make there'll be some interviews or comments. She's not on Twitter anymore. I did look, like, is she on Twitter? Because Jonathan Ross, her husband, is, and he was on Phonecast. We actually did a bit with him, which he called us giant nerds, which is fine, because he himself is a giant nerd, so it's okay. But she's quit from years back. But her last tweets was like thanking people for her birthday wishes, and she showed off a bunch of Game of Thrones house cupcakes that she had received for her. So she's obviously a big fan of the TV show.
She's also a giant nerd.
She's absolutely a giant nerd.
Yes.
I mean, you found one of her books was on X-Files, Mysteries of the X-Files.
That's right. She's in some guide with world guides, essentially.
So I mean, she's one of us as far as that goes, which is promising.
Yes. No, this is true.
Then again, you might point out, but David and Dan also.
Yes, but on the other hand, if we're talking about hiring people, depending on the jobs they've done before, I think that HBO knew what they were getting in David Benioff, because he already had a track record of ruining a perfectly good story when adapting it. So they knew exactly what they were getting. And I'm, of course, talking about Troy, which I will never forgive him for.
Well, Troy, because the Wolverine film isn't entirely his fault.
No.
But okay.
Who could? I don't care about bloody Wolverine film. I didn't even remember that. But I will always remember that he was involved in Troy.
It wasn't an adaptation. There is no Homeric.
No.
Someday I'm going to have you argue with George about this, because he definitely did not agree with the idea that Troy was an adaptation of the Iliad, because it's not called the Iliad, it's called Troy. It's its own thing.
You can't hide it by just changing the name.
Yeah.
That doesn't make your sin go away.
Huh. Is that why George wanted it to be called The Long Night? And then he said HBO will probably want to work in Game of Thrones. Like, The Long Night, well, I've never done anything called The Long Night, so then they don't have to worry about it. But
I suppose that could be the way he views it, but no. Sorry.
No, it doesn't matter. It
doesn't matter. Yeah.
All right. So until then, I'm off to the US this week.
Yes, I'm being abandoned for a whole week.
Yes, with the dog. You'll have plenty of company. Just visiting my family in Florida. And after that, have a lot to catch up on. We'll see what we can get to do videos. It's been a little difficult to get them together.
Yes. And I had such good plans, but
things get in the way.
It's also been ridiculously warm the last month here. So
actually,
sitting down and doing anything has been a bit of a chore. Now it's more of a normal Swedish summer at the moment.
Wet and cool.
Yes. Yeah. Which is more inspiring for doing work with a lot of lights in your face.
So until then, until the next one, whenever that is.